Hello, hello. So you need to think about death. You need to think about your death. Yes, you do. You need to think about your death, whenever it may be. So I was reflecting on this last week, talking about it with someone. Um, Obviously, death and grief being very closely linked, and um, death is still this quite taboo topic. And it's not taboo in that it's socially unacceptable to talk about it so much as it's just become unacceptable within ourselves to face it. Which doesn't do us any favors. So, recently I listened to someone talking about how, we all need to do our wills and funeral plans, and they prefaced it by saying, I know this is morbid. And to someone who, obviously I spend a lot of time thinking about death, and I'm around death, and my work is grief, healing from grief, just around death all the time. So it's bizarre to me to hear it described as morbid, because it's this completely natural thing that's going on around us all the time, and that we really, really need to be able to look at and be able to talk about. And again, when someone says, oh, it's morbid, it comes from a fearful place. It comes from a fearful place. It comes from a place of not wanting to talk about it. From that perspective of, well, we need to, but we don't want to. I'd rather not. Which doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't get anybody anywhere. And I was thinking about this recently, and thinking if you don't contemplate your own death, and if you don't contemplate the absolute reality that you could die any time, that anything could happen to you, then the only reason you're not doing it is denial, because death is all around us. The opportunity to contemplate death and contemplate our own death is all around us. Death is, it's not something that happened to your best friend's neighbour's ex-boyfriend's aunt, right? It's not something all the way over there and, oh gosh, I just never get the opportunity to think about it. It's all around us. It's in the press constantly. Whatever form of media you choose to look at, there's always death for all sorts of reasons. It's in whatever books, TV shows, movies that you watch. It's in your family. It's in your friend circles. It's in your communities. It's in your work area, work life. Just the topic is there. The topic is coming up. It's happening around you. You would have had people die, family, friends. Right, so there's constant reminders and constant opportunities and invitations to be able to look at death. And so if you don't take any of those and you think, oh gosh, I've just not really had the opportunity to think about it, nothing to do with whether or not you've had the opportunity. It's just denial. It's just denial, which is, you're part of we all are part of, for the most part, for most of us, part of a society that gave us that denial. We come from families that gave us that denial. Because they came from families that gave them that denial, and were part of society that gave them that denial and that fear. That's where it comes from, is fear. There's nothing bad luck about thinking about death. There's nothing morbid about thinking about death. From my perspective, it's a bad idea not to, and it's unhealthy not to, and it just increases the denial and the fear not to. And from a grief perspective, it means, if you don't really expect that death can happen around you at any time or to you, every time it's going to be a horrific shock. You never saw it coming. And I was thinking of this analogy a couple of weeks ago where I thought, again, for us to just kind of naively believe that it won't happen anywhere around us, and we still have the story we tell kids when kids, my daughter's 4, and kids get around this age and start to contemplate the idea of death a bit more, and most of them will go through some kind of experience the day they clock that everyone will die and their parents will die and they will die. And often a parent's response can be, well, you don't have to worry about that for a long time. Mummy, daddy, will I die? Oh, not till you're very old. I saw someone actually in a Facebook post say, I tell my kids, the only people who die are really, really sick or really, really old. And you can say to your kid, you're not really, really sick and you're not really, really old, so you're okay, you don't have to worry. And we all know that's not true. That's not how it always happens. So that was just another kind of nicer sounding way of denial and fear. And so it gets instilled into children because we lie to them. From our fear and our denial, we lie to them when they're young, and we don't trust, we don't trust that they can handle the truth because we can't handle the truth, right? How can we impart to them the truth if we can't even face it ourselves? So my daughter has I have a much more open conversation around death in our family. But the analogy I was thinking of recently was, we all have death around us. We all know people that have died. We all know people who've had miscarriages. You may have had them yourself or in your family. We all know or know of people that have died before they're 10, before they're 20, before they're 30. And then when we get up to 30s, 40s, then you definitely know people. You maybe have family members that have died 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, which is still long before we think we're meant to. And I was thinking, because it's something we consider bad, death, we discount that, we ignore that, we still don't imagine it could happen to us or people close to us. And I thought if we turn that around and imagine instead of death, let's talk about lotto. People love this idea of lotto, winning the big one, making all your problems go away. And imagine if all your financial problems, some of them you might get some new ones. But anyway, if you look at all the people you know through those ages and all the people in your family and people in your friendship groups, people through your career that you know that have died earlier than expected or in unexpected ways, and imagine instead of dying, what they had all done was win lotto. If they had all won the big one, that all won enough millions that you would consider you can set yourself up for life with that money. And if you were to look around at all the people you know who've died, instead of having died, they had won the big one, right? You would look around at your family members, your friends and their family members, people you went to school with that you know have died. But now we're saying they won lotto. Just think of all the people you know that in your mind have died before their time and in a way that shouldn't have happened. And imagine instead they'd won lotto. And if you looked around and you saw that many people around you that you knew, that you personally knew, who had won lotto, who had won the big one, you would look around and you would like your chances, right? You would like those odds. You would think, my God, the chances are pretty good. I should get out and buy myself a lotto ticket. If people had looked at it that way instead, they would go, God, well, if my dad won lotto and my auntie won lotto, and I know two people I went to school with who won lotto, and I was on that course with that person and they won lotto, and my friend, well, both of his parents have won lotto, and, from that perspective, you'd be going, shit, the odds are good. The odds are in my favor. If them, why not me? Right, but we're not talking about lotto. We're talking about death. We're talking about something you want to deny and pretend and not look at and pretend isn't going to touch you. So it's about just opening up to the opportunity and the invitation around you to look around at the fact that you know people who have died. You know a lot of people who have died. Not in the way you think you're meant to. Not in the way you think you're going to. And it could happen to someone it will happen to someone very close to you. That's for certain. And maybe it'll happen to you. Maybe you'll die in your 90s. A lot of us will, or hundreds. But maybe you won't. And the thing is not to be stuck in that denial, which only comes from fear. I was saying to someone last week, it's like somebody who's pregnant but refuses to think about the birth. Refuses to prepare for the birth, doesn't want to know anything about the birth. It's morbid. To think about going through that is morbid, even though it's absolutely inevitable. And And we know if you were to hear of such a person, you would know that one, that's only coming from fear, right? That's the only place that could come from, is fear. If we know for certain they are going to give birth, or, let's just say for this example, we know for certain they're going to give birth, like we know for certain you're going to die, then to just refuse to even look at it and kind of consider it morbid and consider it bad luck is actually, it's very strange, right? Like they need to look. It only comes from fear if they're not doing it. And secondly, that if that fear is driving them not to look at it, it's just going to make things worse. That fear is just going to build. Even if they're not thinking about it, they're trying actively to avoid thinking about it, that fear underneath it all is going to build. And when that time comes, they are not prepared and they are not ready. And it's the same with death. What I can tell you from the side of it, like many things, from the side when you're in the fear of looking at it, you imagine that to be in the place of looking at it and talking about it must be horrific. It feels safer back here in the fear. But like most things we fear, you go into that space, the fear is far worse. To spend time talking about death and looking at it openly and honestly is, for most people, actually feels to be a great relief. And then you start to look around from that space and go, gosh, it's strange that people don't talk about death. It's not healthy and it's not helping. It's healthy to think about death. It helps you. It helps you emotionally. It helps you spiritually. It helps you practically. Things like wills and funeral plans and all these things that are really, really, really important, but are very difficult for people to get done when they're behind the barrier of fear about death. So, as I said, there is the opportunity and the invitation constantly from life to look at death, to contemplate your own. Really, really, really important. If it's something you haven't done and you'd like to do, then I would absolutely recommend getting to a death cafe. Google what Death Cafe is if you've not heard about it. But it's precisely that, a chance for people to get together in what might seem like a weird situation to you when you haven't done it, but actually is really comfortable and relaxing and incredibly healthy, and like I said, can be such a relief to people. With other people in a relaxed environment to chat about death, just to have the topic out. It's not you're not going there to learn, nobody's trying to teach you anything, or they shouldn't be. Yes, just a forum for those ideas and those feelings to come up, because it's typically something we don't talk about. It's something we're not comfortable talk about. So if you Google deathcafe.com, they have them all over the world. They're physically run. In the beginning of Death Cafe, I used to run quite a few and do online ones. I don't do it anymore, but I'm sure there must be some online ones too. So if you can get to one. If you can't physically get to one, you can get to an online one. But it's really, really, really important. And to my mind, in grief, when it comes to grief, there is so much room to move in how we handle grief. There is so much growth, there is so much healing as a society, as a world, that we can do, but that won't happen. It can't happen anywhere where people can't look at death. Because if you can't look at death, then you can't question it. You can't think critically about it. You can't investigate. You can't ask questions. And if you can't do that around death, you most certainly can't do it around grief. And so things with grief are not going to shift on a big scale while people can't look at death. So that is what draws me always to encourage this conversation around death. It is important. It is healing. It is healthy. And it can feel way more comfortable than you imagine it's going to. Far more comfortable than just living in this place of fear. Right? I'll put a link here somewhere on this page, deathcafe.com. Check them out. Find a way to have those conversations. You're not doing yourself any favours by staying away from the topic and putting it off. Really, really, really important. All right. Lots of love.